Welcome, everybody. I'm happy to host today's webinar with Joel Bancroft-Connors and Kim Poremski. They're going to be talking about a topic that I think we're all pretty interested in. It's about motivation and the science behind it. I think the context that they're going to use to go into a little bit deeper, they'll talk about some strategies and some frameworks to specifically help Scrum teams stay motivated and engaged. So I think this is going to be a really great topic for us to all talk about. So before we get started, I just wanted to remind everyone we are recording, and we will be sharing the recording to everyone who registered. So give us a few days. After we finish here, we'll pull that together and send the email out to everybody. When you have questions, and I'm sure you'll have some as we go forward, just put them into the Q&A, and no question is pointless to ask, because if we don't get to answer it during the conversation today, we'll definitely put it into the follow-up email. So if you have questions, it's good to put them in. I think at this point, some quick introductions are helpful. So let me start with Joel. Joel is a principal consultant here at Applied Frameworks and a certified Scrum coach and a certified Scrum trainer. Kim Poremski is also here today, and she is a principal consultant as well and a certified Scrum trainer. I've worked with both of them for many years, and so I really appreciate the passion they both bring to helping teams engage, helping them enjoy their work, helping them deliver quality, and then continuously improve. My name is Laura Caldy. I lead sales and marketing here at Applied Frameworks. And generally, we work with companies to improve profitability for software-enabled solutions. So that includes support for building the right solution with the optimal business model for the customers, and then building it in the most effective way. So typically that means we're supporting product management and the use of Agile frameworks like Scrum and the Scaled Agile framework. So I think that is probably enough of a quick intro. And with that, I think we can get started. Again, I will interrupt them every once in a while. It's kind of a warning for you, Joel, and you, Kim. I probably will interrupt once in a while because sometimes the questions that people are asking are just best answered in kind of real time. So with that, Joel, I'll turn it over to you to take over.
Absolutely. Thank you, Laura. Thank you. Hey, Kim, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I am doing good. I am feeling really jazzed. I'm feeling really energized. That said, I mean, I know you and I as Scrum trainers, one of the things we're always dealing with is, well, great, the team I'm working with is not jazzed, it's not energized. And I'm figuring we probably got a lot of smart people out here also. So why don't we go and ask everybody, what are reasons that teams are disengaged? Now, sometimes that can be because they're just having technology issues, kind of like us. We're going to do our best here, but I want you all to come to menti.com and enter in 244796-0. And I put that into chat so you can see it. And I'm in the preview screen, so hopefully this will work. But basically, we're having to use some backup technology to try and see this. So it's not going to be the greatest view. But go ahead and enter in reasons you think that teams are disengaged. We'll give it to see a second to see if the technology actually works. Okay. We'd expect to see some results by now, so we may have to tell Menti to go way.
Joel, they're so disengaged that they can't
there we go.
engage.
Yes, they're so okay. Ooh, all right. No big picture. Hey, let's remember that one, Kim. No big picture. Boredom, lack of self-autonomy. Wow. No clear direction.
Too much work to complete. Okay. It's just a job.
Ooh, wow. Those are pretty serious words there.
Too many meetings came up as well in the Q&A.
Yeah, I see that. No big picture. All right, that's awesome. I encourage you to enter those, because what we will do is when we'll take this word cloud and we're going to put it into the slide deck before we send out this, post the slide deck and send it out. Cyber work. Oh, I wonder if that's like remote work and how much easier it is to become unengaged and lose purpose when you're working remote. All right. Well, we're going to step back into the deck, and let's take a step back from a team, and just to ask this at a more holistic level, what motivates people in general? I mean, what is the reason or reasons one has for acting or behaving in a particular way? Why do we get up in the morning? Maybe we could look to an expert to answer this. Hey, Google, what motivates us? I find these results. Pretty much type in any variation of motivation, what motivates, how to motivate, and the top results are bound to be dominated by Dan Pink's book, Drive, or his YouTube video. As the subtitle of the book says, the surprising truth about what motivates us tells us that once you take money off the table, when people are no longer worried about the money to pay the bills, in the workplace, there are 3 intrinsic motivators that ultimately drive us. So let's really quickly review those. Autonomy, the ability to be self-directed. We just saw that in the word clouds about lack of self-direction, lack of self-organization. I like to think about this. You can think about autonomy both in the good and the bad. If we step into a fast food restaurant, you walk into the back and there is going to be an instruction list right there next to the grill telling you exactly how to build this burger. There is no variation on that. You will put 3 pickles on the burger. The number shall not be 2. The number shall not be 1, and 5 is right out. 3 pickles is the number. There's that. However, if you look at really successful fast food restaurants and such, autonomy can flourish there because they give the employees more organizational and control over how they handle things like customer service or schedules or work allocation. So you can have autonomy can exist even at that level if you create an environment for it. Mastery, the urge to get better at stuff. If all you're ever doing is putting 1 slice of lettuce, 3 pickles on top of a hamburger bun and putting a bun over it, you're not going to get better at making that food. We want to look at things like we want to look at the ability to get better. Smart companies, they offer career tracks. I can think of a great example of this. Long time ago, I actually worked at Starbucks, and my manager, she was awesome. She was great. And I went back a couple of years later after I'd moved into the high-tech industry to say hi to her, and I found out, oh, she was doing so great that she actually got promoted, and she's now helping train managers at the corporate office. So Starbucks actually had this whole career track where you could go from being a barista all the way to being, literally, she had moved to Seattle and was working in the Starbucks corporate office, so that she had a master track. She had an ability to get better. Lastly, we have a purpose, that desire to work on towards something that worthwhile. Does it matter? We already saw that in the word cloud. And if we come back over here to the word cloud, again, it's what was it? Lack of interest, no clear direction. If you don't have that purpose, that driving reason, there's this wonderful quote that I like to think of that was introduced to me by our founder, Luke Homan. If you want to build a ship, don't drum up the men to gather the wood, divide the work, and give orders. Instead, teach them to yearn for the vast and endless sea. That is purpose. So if we look at this, these are intrinsic motivations. These are the things that when you take money off the table are the things that are going to cause people to want to come to work, that don't want to work in your workplace. Now, one of the things we've learned about this is these things have become much more important, or I think we've become more aware of them since the pandemic. You can no longer just offer somebody a good salary and they're going to come work for you. There's so much more. Employees have started to go, no, this is what I care about. I want to do remote work, or I want to work on this kind of stuff. And we've already learned that if you don't provide autonomy, mastery, and purpose, you're going to have trouble retaining good employees. Now, let's ask ourselves a question, though. What does this have to do about Agile? Kim, you want to take that?
Sure. Well, thanks for sharing that, Joel. And obviously, I'm a big fan of Daniel Pink's work. And as an Agilist, I'm always trying to connect everything back to agility. And I'm sure we have many other Agilists on this webinar today as well. So it's only natural to wonder, well, how does autonomy and mastery and purpose relate to agility? And I do think that there are some strong correlations. Let's take principles 5, 8, and 12, for example. They definitely promote autonomy when it comes to trusting the team to get the job done, creating a sustainable pace, and participating in team retrospectives. And then let's take these other principles. We've got principles 3, 7, 9, and 11. And the idea of mastery is present in those. Concepts like delivering value early and often, focusing on that technical excellence and good design, relying on self-organized teams to develop that emergent architecture, the requirements of the design. And in fact, when I look at principle 11, I even kind of see autonomy present there. So that one kind of overlaps autonomy and mastery. But then we have this idea of purpose. And that one to me is not so obvious. Kind of like crickets, right? Is it non-existent whatsoever? Well,
Chirp, chirp, chirp.
I think you could make a case for principle number 1, leaning into purpose, right? Our highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of valuable software, but it still feels like it's a little bit lacking the why. Why is it our biggest priority to satisfy the customer? And so sometimes, just like we need more cowbell, in this case, I think we need more purpose. And so how do we generate that feeling of purpose that creates more engagement in the team? I'm sure that many of us can relate to having worked on projects that seem directionless, or maybe they're going everywhere at once, which is ultimately taking us nowhere. Many of us have worked on projects that were canceled before they ever saw the light of day. I can think of quite a few in my career. And I really like this quote that we're showing here from Mark Zuckerberg. Purpose is that sense that we are part of something bigger than ourselves. The reality is that people want to be on teams that deliver products that customers love. And to develop products that customers love, we have to have this holistic systems thinking view to ensure that our products are sustainably profitable. And so when we understand the whole system, that bigger picture, right, we kind of saw that in some of the Menti words there, we're able to see how our efforts contribute to the greater good of the organization. And then our purpose becomes more clear. So unfortunately, though, as organizations get bigger, the system becomes more and more complex. And then as a result, we kind of find ourselves becoming more and more disconnected from that big picture. And so then we end up with blinders on and we only see portions of the system. Now, some people would say, well, that's why we have a product vision, right? And product visions are important. They serve a purpose, but product visions are very broad. They're often very aspirational and they don't address the other aspects of design thinking. And then we have the Scrum guide. They introduced us to product goals. And that also helps us drive towards achieving that product vision with those mid to longer term objectives. But that still doesn't necessarily give us the picture of the full system. So it kind of makes us ask ourselves, well, how do we get to that full systems view of a product? Well, the Applied Frameworks team has developed a new framework, and it's known as the Profit Stream Canvas. And it is a way to provide a systems view of a product in a very easily consumable and visual way. So as you can see, the canvas consists of 10 blocks. One of them is the customer dimension. And this is where product teams tend to focus. This is where product vision and product goals are typically found as well in this customer block. And then also, we have another dimension in the canvas, and that's the solution. And this is generally where the technology teams tend to focus. And part of the reason why your team might not be engaged is because they're only seeing a small part of this whole picture. Primarily, your team is probably seeing a lot on the solution aspect of this canvas. If you're lucky, they're seeing a little bit into the customer view of the canvas. A lot of teams don't even get that. Right? They're just so removed from the customer, they don't even have that solid understanding. But assuming that they do, that's just 2 of the blocks. So they don't generally have an understanding of the other 8 dimensions that comprise this whole system. And so when you have this system, you're connecting not only just those 2 blocks, but all of these other blocks. And the danger about not having a systems thinking approach is that you may not even know you're wearing blinders. And so I'm introducing this canvas, I'm talking about this system and how they're all interrelated. And I realize that might sound a little bit abstract at the moment. So what I want to do now is turn it back over to Joel, and he's going to walk us through a real world case study that illustrates what I'm talking about here, right? How all of these dimensions are interwoven as a system to create a sustainably profitable solution. So Joel, I'm going to give it back over to you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kim. So I want to take you back into the mid 2010s, company that was founded by Luke Holman and called Conteneo. It was originally Innovation Games, Conteneo, and they had a product called Weave. And it was the mid 2020s, and they were actually facing a challenge. Now, we got an advantage here is, Laura, you were actually the VP of sales at Conteneo, weren't you?
I know, I have to do this at least once so Joel can hold up his little card. Yeah, no, it was a good decade of my life, and we learned, or I personally learned, an awful lot of stuff that I'm realizing, wow, it's all in this canvas now. And at the time, it wasn't organized in such an elegant way. So yes,
Right.
I was there.
So as I understand, I mean, we have the advantage of having somebody firsthand to help us with this. You were facing a problem of you had the wrong customers the wrong way at the wrong price. Can you maybe tell us a little bit about what the challenge you were facing that you then tried to solve?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think it's true. At the end of the day, we would say we ended up pivoting away from the original concept that we had with the platform. So wrong is a little bit of a misnomer, but we found a way better way of bringing the product to market. So originally we built this to provide Agile teams better access to customer insights and customer data. So the big opportunity was, at the time, most customer research was managed by a research team or super expensive because it would be outsourced. And so the idea was, if we could kind of democratize the ability to connect with customers for research, Scrum teams and Agile teams and companies in general would have a better job making decisions about what should we be building for the customer. So at the time, we were thinking it was a smaller number of people doing external research with external people, with stakeholders, and with the market, basically with our customers. And what we discovered is, while that was certainly a need and certainly interesting, it opened up a whole new set of opportunities for us, because when that data kind of came in and teams were then figuring out what should we build and how do we build it more effectively, how do we get better with Agile, the bigger, more important problems to solve were around internal collaboration and alignment inside the company. So yes, external research was interesting, but the bigger problem, the more valuable problem to solve for customers, was internal decision-making and internal alignment.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So, I mean, if we look at this, the problem is the customer wasn't the problem the customer had wasn't the problem they really needed to be solved. So in some extent, you're right, Laura's right. They didn't have the wrong customer. It was just, how was the customer using it? What problems did they actually need to have solved? And so they were looking at that customer aspect. They recognized that they needed to change their value exchange model. So really quickly, a value exchange model is simply how we exchange money with the customer. There are several different kinds of value exchange. For Conteneo, originally what they were looking at was a metered based approach, not unlike a video game. You put in the quarter, you play the game, you want to play another game, you got to put in more quarters. They wanted to move to a time-based access or a subscription-based service. It's like you can use you can play the games as many times as you want in this month for a fixed fee. Now, to change the value exchange, if they change the value exchange model, they would then be able to change their pricing model, which would allow Conteneo to update and create a more sustainable solution for them. Because the metering-based model, I mean, one of the things you think about it is with metering, it's, okay, I don't know when somebody's going to come and put a quarter in my machine. It's hard to build a sustainable business when you don't know how many people are going to come and put quarters in the machine. Time-based access, we've got these people, we've got subscription models, they sign up for a year service. That's sustainable, that's predictable. To do that, though, would have to get the customer to agree, because they'd have to change their customer license. And that's a big thing. You can't just go and make huge changes without changing the customer license. And if you're in a B2B type thing, you can't just say, oh, we're going to change your terms without having a conversation. Maybe your contract says you can. That doesn't mean you shouldn't have a conversation with your customer. A great example of this from earlier in our founder's career, Luke tells a story about working on a product, and they'd written the customer license agreement to include maintenance for all versions of Mac OS. Well, they'd written this when Mac OS was at version 6. Suddenly we come along to version 10, which is changing to a Unix code base, and they're, oh my goodness, we can't do this. They had to go back and have a conversation with the customers. Conteneo did this. The good news was that in doing this, the customers actually realized, hey, wow, this would actually be a better ROI. We can sell a subscription model a lot better than this metered-based approach. And it's going to be easier for us to understand and justify for our use. And it will better serve the way we want to use this as an internal tool where we're not having to worry about, well, do I have enough quarters to go play the game? No, I got a subscription service. I can use it. I can play as many games as I want. Something else that they discovered in doing this and having these conversations was the customers that really mattered to Conteneo and the ones that were really in their growth lineup were in Europe. And Europe was getting ready to implement GDPR. And so, okay, wow, not only we're going to also have to update our data policies around all of this, no matter what. So that brought them to the question of, well, how would this all impact our solution, the technology that we're building? I mean, a lot of companies would just say, oh, it's just a pricing change, right? We don't need to worry about it. And they just send some requirements to engineering and expect it to magically come out. Fortunately, Conteneo didn't work that way. They practiced system thinking from the very beginning. And I mean, I had an opportunity to go to the Conteneo office at one time, and it's like engineering, leadership, sales, they all sat in a common area and they had conversations. They looked at the big system. Because of that, they were able to quickly say, well, the architecture was built for metering, and also our data policies absolutely need an overhaul. To do this, it's going to require re-architecting of the system. To do that, most likely will require us to pick up some new third-party technologies that we're going to have to license, which is going to change how much we pay for the product, pay to run the service, which is going to affect what we're charging. So we're going to have to look at that. However, we're just realizing that in doing this, we actually will open up an opportunity to be able to experiment more. This is what we kind of call the profit engines part of the canvas, the ability to, how can we answer questions like, how can we expand our offering? How can we attract new customers or expand how much we're doing with existing customers? So some examples of things that they were able to start exploring was to create an ecosystem where people could create new games and submit them and basically create a monetization that would incentivize people to share this stuff and to build the platform with more and more games or frameworks.
One of the things that I'll add in here, Joel, is that the reason that I think this was so interesting for the teams who were working on this was, even if there was a story or a task that needed to happen in a particular sprint in order to make progress against this lofty goal, because we were all discussing it in this way, even what might have seemed like a boring and mundane or a low-level thing, everyone understood why it had to happen in order to create the eventual outcome that we wanted with the platform. So there wasn't such a thing as unimportant, boring work. Like every piece of code, every quality check that happened, every thing that happened during the sprint, people understood where it fit into enabling something that was much bigger and much more exciting. It's sort of like what I'm doing enables something bigger than myself. The other piece that was super, I think, motivating for people was that they knew which customers needed this and what would happen when they got it. Right? Like they were building something that they knew was going to get into the hands of a particular market segment or a particular customer. And so having this understanding of the bigger system meant that the motivation for kind of rolling up your sleeves and getting it done was really clear for the team on all fronts, regardless of the kind of part of the task or part of the product they were working on.
Yeah, and so not only was it the system of the canvas and connecting the technology and understanding all that, it also, because of that, you brought your engineering people all the way into the customer box, which meant you literally brought them all the way out to the customer. I mean, you had that person who was writing API code, they knew exactly how their API code was going to help the customer because they literally were in the conversations with the customers. And that's something we talk, I mean, Kim and I talk about all the time when we teach us our CSM classes is, look, don't be a barrier to the stakeholders talking directly to the developers. You're going to get a better solution when they're brought into the room.
Yeah, and I think as a company gets larger and more complicated, you have to be more intentional about making those opportunities happen. But yeah, I mean, it's, you know, and we don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole, but it's certainly interesting when companies forget some of the things they might be able to take advantage of, for example, with a sprint review. It's like who you're inviting and the conversation you kind of enable to have happen can help to create an understanding of the larger system for the stakeholders and for the developers and for the other folks that are in the room. So you have to be more intentional. It's not like it's an easy thing to do. I certainly don't want to hand wave it, but at the same time, if you don't do it, I think getting back to the topic about motivation, you might be missing an opportunity to kind of inject some energy into what motivates a team and connecting them to the bigger picture whenever possible. You know, and this is one system's way of thinking of doing that, I think is an energizer to that kind of motivation part that we're all talking about here.
Absolutely. And I think what we found was, I'm just going to see if this works, is they started by just thinking about the customer and going, the customer isn't getting what they wanted. And then they had to start to see how is that going to change? How could we change basically how we were pricing it so the customer would be more interested, which the translation is how do we change our value exchange model? And then what would be that overall income? But they started here. And as you can see, as they went through the whole conversation, they created an entire systems view that literally showed them that every part of this, all of these pieces were fitting together to create that solution and that whole. And because they had development involved in those conversations, they didn't end up with any surprises. They didn't end up with, oh, well, we're going to promise the customer this, and then go talk to engineering, and engineering going, you promised what? That's going to take us at least 12 months to build. And I mean, come on, who has not literally had that kind of conversation? It's like, oh, well, we've already sold it to the customer. You got to have it done in 6 months. It's like, yeah, that's right. Next, please. All right. So with Conteneo, this was a conversation they had. And I mean, we're looking at a major thing, re-architecting a platform. That is no small task. And it could have been very easy for them to go, no, we're just, oh, well, we need to re-architect. They took a systems view, though, and they looked at all of that. And because they did that, they adjusted their roadmap. They focused on re-architecting the platform, which required putting new functionality on hold for a bit of time there, right, Laura?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. So, I mean, they stopped new functionality. They delivered a new solution to existing customers. They attracted more customers. They created a sustainably profitable business model. I went through something similar in the early 2000s when I worked for a company called Veritas, and they were building this new dashboard management tool. And it went gangbusters for 2 years. The customers loved it. We came out with it in 6 months. They loved it. And for 2 years it was like growth. And suddenly sales just fell through the floor. And when the product manager actually went out and started talking to the customers, like, well, quality sucks. It's not reliable. And we went and bought this other service that does a quarter of what you do, but at least it doesn't crash. We were so busy and focused on the next, we didn't look at that system view and realize that we got out over our skis. With Conteneo, the end result was that they were eventually acquired by Scaled Agile as one of the first building blocks in the Safe Studio ecosystem. You think about that, small company acquired, that is an absolute success. That is part of sustainability. And Scaled Agile would not have bought them if they didn't have a profitable, sustainable business model, because then there wouldn't have been a value in making that purchase. Any closing thoughts there on this, Laura?
No, I mean, nothing is easy. And so when you have motivated teams figure out hard problems. So we certainly had a lot of hard problems to solve, but the motivation level was very high. And I would definitely attribute it to the fact that people understood the bigger why and the bigger system.
So, Kim.
Yeah, I mean, I love this example. And so I appreciate you, Joel and Laura, for kind of walking all of us through this, because I think I'm hoping at least that it really will resonate with folks on the webinar today. I really liked how, Joel, you started drawing. I mean, you could have kept drawing, right? You only drew in a couple boxes, but I mean, if you had taken and drawn in all of those different boxes, we would have seen just how interconnected everything is. And so just kind of going back to that idea that there's this risk in not thinking holistically about our products. And because, Conteneo was taking that systems view and looking at everything in an interconnected way, they were more successful. But had they not, that could have been very detrimental to the profitability of the product and therefore to the success of the entire business. And the other thing I want to point out is, and I think Laura might have alluded to this a little bit, is that, we keep saying, oh, it's this new canvas, right? The profit streams canvas itself is new, but it is the culmination of all of these tried and tested techniques from years of experience and practice. I mean, Conteneo went through this, like you said, in the early 2010s. And so now that we have all of this, we've been able to assemble it into this cohesive framework for the first time. And that's why we're able to share it with everyone like we are today. So I just think that's very, very cool. So I guess I kind of want to come full circle though about, we started off like autonomy, mastery, purpose, and what, purpose and Scrum teams. And, we've talked a lot about the profit streams canvas and all of the different components, but I want to make it really clear that this isn't just about profit alone. It's really all about people. And if we go back to that quote from Mark Zuckerberg that I shared earlier, purpose is that sense that we're part of something bigger than ourselves. And so when you're able to connect a product vision, that's part of the larger view. And then I want to say yes, and connect to that broader system, because that's ultimately what's going to motivate knowledge workers and give them purpose. And I know Laura was mentioning this a few slides back, but the onus is also very much on product leaders to be really intentional about connecting the team to that greater system and then therefore to that greater purpose. So that's how I'd like to kind of bring things full circle and turn it over to Laura, I guess.
Yeah, so I'm hoping that people will have questions. If you do, please put them into Q&A. But we'll be sending out some of these links when we send out the recording, but you can go to profit-streams.com and you'll learn more about our partner program. So for those who are looking for or interested in partnering with us on this, there's a place to learn more about that. The book is amazing. I mean, the cover is really pretty, but I have my copy here and it's big, but it's beautiful. It has great stuff in it. So if you want to learn how to apply some of this, definitely go there. And there are training courses. There are actually, I'm going to put a link into the chat. We also have many more webinars that are recorded. So if you wanted to dig a little bit deeper into the Canvas or any elements of it, we can do that in the webinars. So I'll start with this one that we have. What is a profit stream? That's always a good one to start with. So I'm putting that into chat for everybody right there. And if anybody has any questions, put them into Q&A. Otherwise, I have one for you.
Well, I just wanted to, I'm laughing because you both held your books up and you're kind of making me look bad, but the reality is mine's on my nightstand. So I don't know if that makes me a little pathetic or what, but I actually, that was some of my nighttime reading. So just wanted to clarify that. So I had to laugh about that when you both held your books up like that.
Yeah, well, our CEO, Jason Tanner, and Luke Hellman, who's the other founder of the company, they worked incredibly hard on this book, and they were very lucky to have Federico to work with as well. So Fede is our designer. And what I like about that is he's made things visually very appealing and easy to understand. So I think that the system that can really create a lot of energy and excitement around what a solution looks like, that system, can be tapped into for, okay, well, let's actually create the bigger understanding about where the work we do fit in and what that why is. And, we're certainly happy to provide other ways of creating that product vision and getting Scrum teams excited about what they're building.
Absolutely.
All right. So I actually have a question, and last call for questions that are coming into the webinar here. But the question I have for both of you is, put your product owner hat on for a minute. We think about the product vision and the bigger strategic goals for a product to probably be created and managed by the product manager or the product management team. And then the product owner is actually sitting on a Scrum team. What do you think that product owners can do to help bring in some of the systems thinking that we were just talking about with the profit stream canvas? What can a product owner do to start to bring that understanding into the team to help with things like motivation?
I think that's a great question. Well, it kind of this could get into a long-winded answer, so I'll try to keep it a little bit short. But when we talk about product ownership and product management and product managers, I always describe that relationship as a Venn diagram where, they're doing some of their own separate things, but then they're also really meeting in the middle. I think it's really important for a product owner to also not put their blinders on, right? We talked about the blinders, and sometimes I think that product owners do that as well because they are working with the teams. They do tend to be a little bit more execution focused as well. But the product owners on a Scrum team also need to be as plugged in and have that whole systems view as well, so that they can better articulate that. I also think that to your point earlier, Laura, you were mentioning the sprint reviews, for example, right? Bringing in more stakeholders and more folks that can also help speak to and represent that systems view, I think is really powerful.
Joel, this is a related question, but Dagmar Fink just asked about, hey, autonomy goes closely with the team agreeing in the direction the company is going. So how can you lead these discussions sensibly so that, yes, the team feels they're involved and they can have some impact, but you're not stuck in endless discussion about it?
Well, part of this is not necessarily, yes, there's a systems view. And at Conteneo, that's a great example of they were asking the engineer, well, what do you need to do to make sure this system works? At the end of the day, though, leadership does have to pick a direction. It's being clear about that and communicating. You don't necessarily have to even have full open discussion. It's like, look, here's where we're going. Here's why we're going there. Do you want to get on board? If you think about the famous Simon Sinek YouTube talk of the customers don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. You're not necessarily getting the customer to go, hey, do you think we should be building an iPhone? They built an iPhone. They gave a compelling why. Leadership has to make it very clear, what is the purpose and why do you want to go there? Then your employees are going to vote with their feet. If they love your purpose, they're going to stay. If they don't like your purpose, they're going to go. Don't sacrifice your purpose because a couple of individuals don't agree with it necessarily. It's more be intentional and so that everyone knows what it is. I've come into companies where that API developer has no idea how their code connects to the big picture, or they even know what we're building. We worked with one client where literally in the team kickoff, we threw out the regular script and we spent the first half day on what is commercial insurance and why should you care? Because they'd hired all these people and they didn't even really understand what they were building in the big picture.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Joel, and I'm just going to add one other idea in there. I think one of the things that we try to do is to be really practical as well. And so one way that you can make this happen, the how do I help my team have these discussions without getting endlessly stuck into them, is that could actually be one reason to change the central question of a retrospective. Right, retrospectives aren't always about what are we doing well and how can we get better? Because honestly, you keep asking that same question every single time and it can become really boring and it just becomes a rote task where the value of doing it kind of loses its punch, right?
Yeah.
So, right. So you could change the question about, to review kind of the strategic direction of the product and to take a look intentionally at the longer roadmap, not just a sprint planning exercise, but actually have the product owner lead the discussion around, hey, here's the the 6 to 12 month view on where we think we're going with the product, and give that kind of roadmap perspective that you might even be sharing with some of your key customers to get feedback on it, and have the team discuss it, right? Make sure that they're aware of what's coming, and they may end up finding opportunities to kind of really engage in some of that future that's coming. They understand what is coming, and they may even bring up something that's pretty important that the product owner would end up feeding back up through the product management function of that product. So it's a time-boxed event, right? That's how you can ensure it doesn't end up becoming unhelpful. And it's good to have your teams aligned with a longer term roadmap than just what they might be seeing in a sprint planning session.
Absolutely. I can absolutely see how you tie that into how does the team become more effective, improve its quality, which is the goal of a retrospective. It's the what do we need as a team to be more effective at meeting this long-term product goal? And that means we got to make it very clear, what is the long-term product goal?
I also see, there's a lot of change management elements in here too. And, one of my favorite quotes is like, people aren't going to want to change or do things if they feel like things are happening to them. And so autonomy doesn't necessarily mean that you're completely making every single decision all the time. A lot of times it just means that you're coming along in that journey. You're not being told things. And so I think I see a lot of change management aspects in that as well.
Laura, our mutual friend, Sean Berry, he has that wonderful thing of people don't want things done to them. They want to be involved in it. Do you remember? It's a great way of saying, but it's like people don't want things done to them. They want to be involved in the process.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm sure the quote was great because Sean is super smart, but I can't remember it to save my life. He's much more clever than I am about stuff like that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we're getting close to the end of our time box here, but I wanted to give people a couple more minutes if they have any other questions, and then give both Joel and Kim, both of you, a chance to kind of give us some of your parting advice or parting words before we call it a wrap for this webinar. Any last minute thoughts that you have that you would maybe impart on the team, or any particular, I don't know, any starting condition on if they wanted to get familiar with this canvas, where do you think they should start?
Honestly, I think one of these things is, get the book. However, if this is something where you really go, wow, I totally understand this and everything, learn more. We've started offering classes around this. The pricing fundamentals class that basically walks through how to use this and frameworks to be able to actually use this canvas, because having a canvas is great. Knowing how to use the canvas, that's a whole another layer. And so check out our pricing fundamentals class. We've got one in Europe on May 2nd, and we've got one in Pacific time zone on at the end of May. That would be my big plug.
Yeah, I just put the link to the one on May 2nd in Europe into chat in case people want to take a peek at that. That one's coming up fairly quickly on May 2nd.
And that one's going to be an in-person one, right?
Yep, that's in person, and that's in Germany. So either you're already there or you've been dying to go. But if you also have friends and colleagues in Europe, you can share that link with them as well.
Yeah, and then the one at the end of the month will be a virtual class. So it'll be in the Pacific time zone, but anybody around the world can join.
And you had already kind of mentioned the webinars earlier, but that would be my one thing. Obviously, I think it would be great for folks to purchase the book and really get to kind of delve in, but that might feel like a lot for folks. And so we have published so many of these webinars, and that's one of the things I like about doing them, is that we make them available even after the fact. And so I think that's a really great way for folks to start to get indoctrinated into what this canvas really means and what does it mean for me and how I approach my job and my role, because it's really powerful and it has many different applications. And I think that once folks start to delve in, they're going to see that more and more.
Yeah, I just put another link into chat that will aim you at a collection of some of these blogs that Kim just referred to. So if you want to click on that, you can find it easily.
And Kim, you should look at questions. Somebody's saying hi.
Hi, Gary. Actually, it's funny. Gary had reached out to me recently, and so Gary, you're on my whiteboard to reach out to soon. I look forward to reconnecting with you. So I'm really glad you were able to join this webinar today.
And Vic Bonacci, he's a fellow CST, a friend of mine. Absolutely, Vic. That's, for me as a Scrum trainer, it was like this whole profit stream stuff. It's like, my God, this is like a whole new world to learn. But as I got into it and got to read the book more, I saw that connection. I saw, wow, this is the missing piece that I've been looking for in my classes. And I'm currently looking at revamping my CSM and my CSPO workshops to use a steel thread of the profit stream canvas, because I think both at the team level and of course at the product owner level, this can be that final way to connect the customer to the individual engineer.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, I appreciate the questions. Joel and Kim, thank you so much for putting this together. I thought it was an interesting way of looking at how can you help Scrum teams stay connected to the bigger vision. And, you know, everyone knows that happy Scrum teams are more productive and produce higher quality work. Happy people just make it better.
Absolutely.
So thank you both. And we will share the recording soon, and appreciate everybody's time on the webinar. Thank you so much and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you for joining.
Take care, everyone.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.